Morning warriors and welcome to Why Shy Why. Today I wanted to talk about something a little bit more technical in nature. We've had a couple of groups we've been working with recently where we've used APIs extensively to make their systems talk to each other. And I wanted to talk about some of those things because there's been a little bit of confusion in the way that APIs work. I mean, just like tech has a lot of confusion as it is. I wanted to shed a bit of light onto how APIs work and what you can do with them. There is an accompanying download, guys. If you could just check down underneath this video, there'll be a link. Download that for me, and then you can follow on as I speak. Okay, so let's get into it. So one of the things I keep saying to people is that we at Soft Solutions, we're second-tier providers of software. The reason why I say that is because usually when you are starting off in a business, and a business starts off, they're finding software that's available to them off the shelf, right? And that makes sense because that's one, the cheapest, and two, they're probably in a place where they don't really know what they want yet. Going forward though, when they outgrow those systems, what they'll find is that they need functionality that isn't available out there for the general public. And so what they will do is engage someone like us where we would write them custom code, okay? There's a step in between those two though, where you might have off-the-shelf software that you want to talk to other off-the-shelf software. And so we've had two examples of that very recently. One of them is a client of ours that has a e-commerce shopfront, and then using a platform like Shopify or PrestaShop. On the other front, they've got also a back-end accounting system, right? And so what they want to do, like a QuickBooks or a Xero, what they want to do is they want orders to flow in from the e-commerce shop into their back end, so they don't have to have that dual entry of invoices, basically, right? And it makes a whole bunch of stuff downstream a lot easier, which we can talk about later. So having something in place that automates your invoicing is actually a really great place to start, because invoicing is one of those things that, or accounts payable generally, is a job function that adds very little value except for the value that's been added beforehand, right? It formalizes that in an invoice and then it sends the invoice to the customer. The customer needs to pay and then you chase up the payment process, all that sort of stuff. So the best way to do that, in my opinion at least, is to reduce the human error that is inherently there because humans are processing, reduce the double entry of data, and then the last part is to free up some of those account payable people to do the things that are higher value, right? The things that make more sense and are more valuable to your business. So how do we do something like this? Well, let's go down the path of an analogy. When we're talking to people that don't understand the language we're speaking in, we put someone in the middle. We call them a translator, right? And so very similar to that, when we want two systems to talk to each other, what we need is a translator to sit in the middle. What we do at Soft Solutions is build the translator, right? Now, a translator must know both languages, right, obviously, and be able to translate, yeah? Okay, cool. So let's take that analogy one step further. A translator cannot translate until he or she knows that the person that they are translating for, the persons they are translating for, can speak. Yes? Now, the analogy breaks a little bit here because most humans can speak, but in system speak, in system talk, they don't necessarily speak, right? And so this is what an API basically is. While it's called an application programming interface, but forget that, that's crap. What you want to know is this. An API allows a system to talk and to listen, okay? That's it, that's all it does. Very similar to how we talk and listen, they do exactly the same thing, except APIs usually, well, not always, but usually will speak different languages, a language just for them, okay? And so you need this translating machine that sits in between to do the translating for you. Cool. So one of the first things you want to do is when you're coming up with this idea of automating invoices, for example, or anything that sort of bridges gaps between two systems, what you want to do is firstly understand that both systems have APIs because that's how they speak and listen. Okay, if they don't have an API, come and talk to us, because there are ways around that, but it does get a little bit more complex. For the purposes of this video, we're talking about systems that have APIs, and most modern systems do these days. Okay. The second thing is to then, once you know that you've got APIs on both ends, is to create a translator machine, or whatever you want to call it, right? This thing sits in the middle, right? And so in that sheet you've downloaded, you'll see that I've got a machine in the middle that translates the languages that it's speaking between systems, right? Now, it can be two systems talking to each other, like in my example, back-end accounting and front-end e-commerce shop. Or you can have multiple systems happening as well, and we'll come back to an example like that. So what you want to do is you build a translation device, a translation machine, right, that sits in between these two systems, which in itself is a bit of a system. Its first and primary job is to translate, obviously. Its second job is to check for weird stuff, right? Like, for example, what if the language isn't what the language we thought it was going to be, right? And so you'd have to fix that. What if, okay, here's a really good example. We have, with this group that we're working with, they send out free samples, right? And so a free sample in their e-commerce world is actually an order, right? Which makes sense because it's an order, but it's free. Whereas in their accounting package, they don't want those free samples as an invoice because they're $0, right? So what we've done is we've filtered out anything that's got a $0, right? Which gives us a bit of a clue as to what we can do next with these sort of translation machines. And that is to build in bespoke, custom business rules just for your organization, right? And so that could be a whole bunch of stuff. I know we were working with another company earlier on this year where they had a project management tool on one side and an invoicing tool or a back-end accounting tool on the other. And what they wanted to do was automate that so their staff would go into the project management tool and log their timesheets or their work logs, and they would be associated with a particular client in a particular project, right? And then at the end of the month, all they had to do was run this machine. This machine would suck up all those timesheet information and spit out an invoice for each of the clients, right? So we knew by building in the business rules into the translation machine, we were able to aggregate everything and put them into one invoice rather than one invoice per timesheet or per person. We were able to find the right recipient the actual customer should go to. We were able to figure out whether this was a repeating subscription-based invoice or whether it was a one-off invoice. We also built in things like terms, right? So some companies you're working with might have 30-day terms, whereas others might have 60-day terms. We were able to build all these custom rules into the translation device. And so what happened was, at the end of this particular example, the accounts payable staff actually saved themselves about 30 hours a week, right? So that's 3/4 of a full-time person that we were able to save for them. And it's also one of the great reasons why invoicing is so good to start with this thing, because your return on investment is so quick, right? You are spending quite a bit on someone who's pretty smart in accounts payable. And so if we can reduce that, the transactional, the boring work for them and free them up to do some of the more high value work by 30 hours a week, that's actually, it pays itself off very quickly. So not only that though, once you've got a translation device around, what you can do is for them, tax time became a lot easier. They could rely on the data because there was no human element and no data entry issues. And their financial reporting to the board became really easy every month as well because there was all this data flow happening, right? So there's a whole bunch of great reasons why you want to use APIs to integrate your systems. And I would say that it's a better step than actually customizing in the first place, right? So if you have something like that, or you think, two systems working together is actually going to save the company a whole bunch of time or money or whatever it is, come and talk to us. Otherwise, please feel free to share with anyone who you think we might be able to help with that sort of thing, because one of my passions is really finding organizational inefficiencies and just, plugging holes here and there until you have this great organization that just flows really well. Anyway, guys, thanks again for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And if you need anything, please give us a buzz or catch us on LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever. Oh, and don't forget to check out a new blog. I'll leave the link underneath. Cheers.